For our first video, the album that we're going to explore, discover, and revisit is Concrete Blonde's Bloodletting. So pull it back out if you had it on CD, pull up those old MP3s, and if you've never heard this one before, pull it up to stream because it is fantastic. So first we're going to cover some statistics, some stats, some dates about the band itself, explore their instrumentation, the release dates and such. We're going to get into eventually some audio analysis of the album itself and the different tracks and the track listings. We're going to talk about our own memories, how this album influenced us. So you're totally welcome, and I would highly encourage you to share your memories about this great music. We're going to talk about some fact-finding, just curiosities, questions that I had as I was going through to research this album and this band along the way. And we're going to answer the question, as always, does it stand the test of time? It's been a long time. Would I listen to this now in my 40s? So Concrete Blonde. They're a band that were based in Hollywood, in LA, and they were mainly in operation from 1982 to 1994. They had some reunions along the way. They had 2 additional albums that came out of those reunions at a later time. And they were mainly known as a 3-piece band. But I'd say primarily it was Jonette Napolitano and Jim or James Mankey. So Jonette played bass guitar and sang like a powerhouse. And Jim played some glorious lead and rhythm guitar. And they sort of had a rotating cast of different drummers along the way. Some would stay for a few years and then leave, and others would be for a few years. So mainly a 3-piece band, but the 2 main players were Jonette and Jim. As far as studio albums, they have 7 main albums that they released. So quite a good little discography there. They've got 5 live albums, and Bloodletting specifically is the 3rd album in their discography. This album was released on May 15th, 1990. And the genre and the vibe itself, I would say, is, well, Wikipedia lists it as alternative rock. Although, you know, at the time that it was released, it's sort of like, what does alternative rock even mean anymore? Because everything was alternative rock. I'd say that it's just a super clean, basic, down-tempo rock and roll. And this album specifically has more of a goth influence. Yeah, so alt-rock with goth leaning, I would say. The length of this album is 42 minutes long, and the label that they were on is called IRS. And I didn't really know anything about this label, so I kind of, went to find out just out of curiosity what it was. And it was a smaller, like punk/new wave label with Universal as the parent company. But some interesting facts is that REM was also on this label, and Michael Stipe actually was the one who suggested the name of the band. And then I saw Dead Kennedys were on this label, and also Black Sabbath and everything. So it's just something I'd never heard of, so I thought that was cool. Concrete Blonde as a band, it says, were signed in 1987. And in an interview that I read with Jonette, she said that they had been playing for about 10 years before they actually got signed. And so I can see if they started in 1982 and they had been playing, and Bloodletting was released in 1990, it had to be about 10-ish years before they really got some sort of national recognition. And I could see where one would, that's a long time to be in this game before, you're finally signed or noticed. So I could see where one would be starting to approach a little bit of burnout by that point. Jonette described this album as, and it's Wikipedia, so take this quote for what you will, but it says, miserable, not happy, and self-indulgent. which I found that hilarious because I did not find this album ever to be miserable or not happy. And I mean, I guess I could see self-indulgent if, you wrote it and it was your material and you knew the context in which you were writing it and it came from your own personal experiences. So it may seem a little bit of self-indulgence. But of course, as you release your art into the world and other people pick it up and they make it theirs, I would not describe this album as any of those things. But as I was thinking about this, maybe I just have a higher threshold for misery. But Concrete Blonde is a band. I don't think that you would ever be able to find a band that sounds anything like them. Their sound itself just totally blows it away. I mean, for one thing, it's a female-fronted band with female vocals, but the vocals themselves are very sort of lower range, belted alto. It's not screeching, it's not harsh, it's so just soothing and beautiful. The combination of female-fronted bass player and then these sort of trinkling guitars over the top of it and like a steady rocking beat. I mean, I don't think as far as instrumentation-wise, I've ever seen a band or heard a band anything quite near this. I mean, it's just so unique. And really, really, this album in particular was such an influence on me. I first discovered this album when I was 12. So I was 12 in 1991, and I discovered this by, my mom had it. My mom had it on CD, and she had it on these little, CD shelves that were sort of a stand-up thing. And one of my favorite things to do was to just go through these CDs of things that I had never heard of and be like, okay, this looks interesting. My mom likes it. Let me check it out. And that was the case with this album. I had never heard of the band. And when I pulled out the CD, the first thing that grabbed me was the album cover. Of course, it's gorgeous. It's got roses on it. And then I saw the band name, Concrete Blonde. And I thought that was just so interesting. And it has exactly as it was meant to. It has an edge to it, and then it has a softness to it. And that, it sums up the band, and that's why, Michael Stipe suggested that they be named that, and it caught me. It brought me in too. I remember taking it out, putting it on, and hearing those first few notes of the opening, and I was like, whoa, this is different. We're about to, and then I heard the female vocal, and I was like, wow. At the time, since this was the album that they had released and this was their hit, other people around me knew of this album too, and this band. And I know that there were other, younger girls who were listening to it and letting it influence them. And so I really hope that Johnette knows how much of an influence that she was on young females to begin playing music at that time. It's right in my vocal range, so it was really easy for me to practice to. And playing guitar and singing is a skill, and it's a difficult one because, you are keeping time with both hands and an instrument, and you are keeping time and expressing with something else, much like playing drums with the hands and the feet. You are using two parts of your body in a certain rhythm to express and keep that time. It's difficult. And I appreciated that about what Johnette brought, was that it was easy for me to sort of learn her covers and keep the time with it. It's not overly too complex music to try to learn and cover. And also just hearing that lower register voice, and as a young girl, just being like, oh no, it's just another female to look up to. That, oh no, I can do this. I can do this too. It's not all just a bunch of dudes. So, that really inspired me, one of the great female rockers that inspired me back in the day to get started and keep going. I started to cover the songs, and I would play Joey in the little cafes, in my little hometown in the corner. I would play it at little parties, and just I would, always practice and keep my vocals up to this album because it's in a really very pleasurable space of the lungs to be able to belt this out to. It's not like higher up in your nose that you're keeping the vocals. It just feels so good to sing to. I hope that you all were able to listen to it again and follow along and be able to think about different comments about the audio and things that you may have picked up or noticed, or things that are different, or just, in general, if you know anything about audio, observations. So here are my observations after listening to this album just now. I listened to it again about an hour ago. Overall, the bass guitar doesn't have as much lower end as we're used to these days. It is sort of tonally higher up in pitch, and we're used to kind of having that bass heavy, that has, of course, I think I might have I don't have the remastered version. I think I actually do have the original version from when it was released. So that is a quality in remastering that they usually jack up a lot more of the bass. So I would expect to see that on the remaster. And I did read that they released a remastered version. So potentially that might sound a little different. The guitar tone itself throughout the album, as I said, is that sort of mid-range clean. It has sort of a metallic quality that characterized the 80s. It's not super dirty, distorted. The mixes aren't crowded out with a bunch of distortion, and it makes for some really beautiful, sparkly guitars. The instruments don't cover each other. They don't cover anything. There's just... The way that it was recorded and mixed lets the music be exactly what it is. And even though there are atmospheric elements that go throughout the album, everything is audible. It's totally clear. And this also really allows the vocals to shine. And the vocals, the reverbed, belted alto, and the guitar solos themselves aren't screeching or ear-piercing. They're just pure and mid-range and pleasant. So it really makes for an overall just easy sort of down-tempo listening experience. And especially, I love that goth vibe. I'm not gonna lie, it's the greatest thing ever. I love that just sort of twinge of, she called it miserable, little twinges of sadness, but something that's emotionally accessible in that way. And you can hear it in the delivery of her vocal as well. And so, follow along if you're thinking about each track, or you're familiar with each track in this way. So, or go back and check it out and see if you agree with my assessment. This album has 10 tracks, and the first one is Bloodletting. The first thing I noticed when I was going back to listen to this is those reverb toms as it comes in. It has a lot of nuances atmospherically that I noticed because I wasn't singing along this time when I listened to it. So a lot of things came up. I can hear the REM connection actually in the way that it is tonally in the instrumentation, or maybe, they might have been recorded by the same engineers in the same way. But I did notice that after I knew that REM was on their label, I was like, oh, okay, I can see that. It has those characteristics. And of course, that rollicking bass line that goes through, and the subject matter, the fact that it's, Anne Rice inspired, about, got vampire subject material. And it's just sort of like New Orleans influenced with an LA production quality, which totally is what the band is about. It kind of sums them up in a way. The second track, Poisonous Garden, the first thing I noticed here was that wonderful delay on the vocal. And the song itself has like the speed of punk rock, but it's not abrasive. It's just an upbeat, pleasant rock song. And it really just like it gets rocking, gets you going. And then the third track, Caroline, I'll never know why this one wasn't a mega radio hit. I mean, it should have been, if they were going to choose a song to be the radio hit, I would have chosen this one. Now, I know whenever I was looking into this, that their sort of bigger hit from this album was Joey, but I didn't actually know that back whenever I had discovered this album. I didn't even know that they had any hits. So, if it were up to me and I were producing this or choosing, I would have chosen this song. It just totally lends to being on the radio. I mean, those reverb belted vocals, the harmonies on the choruses, it would have been so perfect for like late 80s, early 90s radio. And the guitar solo just fits cleanly and perfectly in there, perfectly placed at the right point. So that would have been my choice. For track number 4, Darkening of the Light, that call and response that it has with the vocal, Jonette, and then answering herself. This makes this song female duo acoustic, harmonizing acoustic guitars. It's just a dream as a cover. Like if you've got a woman and another woman harmonizing with each other and playing both parts and playing along, it's just beautiful. So track 5 is I Don't Need a Hero. This one, for me, I love this one because it's about the lyrics, the emotional content and what she's saying. She doesn't need a hero, a soldier, a father. It's like, it just really grabs you in that sense. For the next track, Days and Days, this one I love in particular because the feeling that you get as a singer when that chorus hits and you can belt out days and days, it just hits it right in the right spot when you're singing it. And it is a joy to sing along to. It feels so good. For track 7, The Beast. This is one of my favorite. If I had to choose, I don't know if I could choose among these songs because they're all literally perfect. But if I had to choose, this is one of my favorites. I covered it on my own, just recording at home. The longing, the pulling, the urgency, the guitar solo, it just grabs you. I love it so much. If the album had a weak point, which I don't think it does, but it's like try to find one of Jimi Hendrix's bad performances kind of a weak point. I would say it's the next song, which is Lullaby. I thought that mainly because it's coming after such an awesome song and performance. This is the song, when I went back and listened to this, my thoughts were, this is the song I would have expected they would have picked to be the hit for radio play, and then I would have been pissed off about it because everything else is so great, and this is not the one that I would have chosen. And then we get to our actual hit, which is Joey. And then, when I was listening to it just now, I was like, okay, I get it. I mean, I get why. It's an easy cover. It's just, 4 or 3 chords. And it's got that perfect catchy song construction. And really, I mean, it is an earworm. Like, I kind of wish that they hadn't have picked this one either because it's so catchy that it could almost be a turnoff. And it could easily, make a band into a one-hit wonder, which, I wouldn't call this band a one-hit wonder because I just never saw them that way. But I can see how it would have almost been limiting in that way. I can tell when I listen to this song that whoever mixed this specifically focused on making this song perfect. All of the instruments sitting in the mix are extremely audible. The acoustic guitar, it's very separate. You can tell they said, this is the one, you got to make this right. And so that's what happened there. And now we get to our last track, which is Tomorrow, Wendy. And so this one is the closer. It is the emotional, just gut you song. It's the story. It's, I mean, cursing God. If you were, which I was, a teenage girl listening to this album, if you weren't hooked on this album by now, by having the female vocal and all these great songs, I mean, this would have been the song that, closed the deal. Oh God, the ethereal harmonies, the guitars, chords that move, they pan back and forth in each ear, the meandering bass line through the space. It really creates an atmosphere of approaching death, and not in a morbid way, in a just very heavenly way. And the song is about somebody who had AIDS, and at this time, which was early 90s, that was a specific focus subject matter wise. So, and it had a lot of emotional backing to it, and it started to get a lot of press. So, I mean, this just sealed the deal. The album as a whole, you can't get a more perfect group of 10 songs. So it's just very surprising to me that they didn't. I mean, why are they not the biggest band in the world? They should have been the biggest band ever. So that part is hard to understand. So now we're going to get into a little bit of what Jonette herself thought about her band and this album and the music. Because some fact finding that I wanted to get into is, for me, for this band, my main two albums were this one, Bloodletting, and also the live one called Still in Hollywood. I actually, I always do this. I don't know why, but I have yet to explore a lot of the other ones, which is so odd because this was such an influence. So it's like, why haven't you? You've been obsessed with this for 35 years. But I mean, and I will for these videos. But for one thing, what was so surprising to me is when I thought back in the past of whether this was commercially successful, and I didn't remember it being commercially successful at all. I don't remember any hits being on the radio. It was the beginning of MTV. I don't remember any videos being on MTV. And one of the questions that I had in researching this album and the band is, how was this so influential to me and it wasn't to like the rest of the world? Or was it? And I just don't remember. So I went back to try to answer that question. And I really found that Joey was kind of their one little hit, and it's just odd. I don't understand. I wanted to learn more about Jonette herself. I didn't know anything about her, because normally in these days, you know everything about what a celebrity ate for lunch. I mean, we've got social media that didn't exist back then. The internet didn't even exist back then. So it's like not like every aspect of her life could have been documented at that point. I mean, you'd really have to try. And I really had kind of a little bit of trouble about finding information about her. I found like a couple of sort of off the hidden path interviews that people just got lucky enough to interview her. And I read all of that. Interesting woman in the fact that she didn't seem to want to be defined by being a musician only. She, used her music career in order to be able to travel all over the world. And then she does other things. Like, she still plays music. She's one of these people who constantly hears music in her head and has to keep writing. But she seemed to not be too turned on by the music industry. And she seemed to have had a little trouble with the music industry, ups and downs, as she mentioned. But she didn't seem like a person who really wanted to be like a rock star. I mean, she moved out from Hollywood, I guess in her 40s into the desert, and was continuing to do this like flamenco dancing and writing music out in a little cabin somewhere with her dogs. Just sort of a more under the radar type of person. And I think that is really fitting. It not only helps to keep somebody mysterious, where, like I found that to be like the more interesting part of it, is that I don't really know anything about her. And I think that that's great in the sense that it lets the music stand what it is on its own. And then you continue to make what you made of it, not in the way that the person, only in the way that the person who wrote it has defined it, if that makes sense. This album was something that was very influential to me, but when you look at what she thought about it, it was quite different and actually kind of shocking when I read it. She said, "One of the biggest shocks of my life was when Bloodletting came out, and I just didn't think it was any good. I just thought, okay, nobody's going to relate to this, nobody but me. And it was just the most amazing thing to find that it was such a universal thing. People just really understood that record for some reason. It was a real revelation to me to discover that the closer that you get to your own truth, the more universal it becomes. And I haven't been afraid to be honest since then. I have a long way to go with courage, but I'm getting there." That was just such a beautiful, for one thing, I mean, we are our own harshest critics. Like, I could see where, I feel that way about my own stuff. I can see objectively that it's probably good songwriting. I think that it's good, or else I wouldn't have written it, I suppose. But on the other hand, it's so close to you and it's so personal that you just don't think that anybody else would be able to like it, because I get where she's going with this. It feels like that you are just putting your own emotions out there for everyone to see, and you're so vulnerable that people are like, okay, put it back in the box, like that's a little too much. But on the other hand, once it's out there and people can relate to it and your emotions speak to what other people are feeling, and it is this universal recognition, then, people take it into their hearts and they associate the meaning that they get from your lyrics, from your music, with their own life experience, and they take it in and it becomes a personal part of their lives. And I really feel that this is what this album has done, and I'm just so thankful for it. Does this album stand the test of time? Would I listen to it now in my 40s as it came out 35 years ago? And drumroll, absolutely. I listen to it today just like I listened to it when I was 12. It's timeless. It's beautiful. People that are younger than me that I played it for note that it sounds sort of 90s, whatever that means. I guess I can see that. But on the other hand, there's just some things that, despite the time that they were released in, as Jonette was saying, when you get to that place of having universal emotionality, it just is timeless and ageless and perfect. If you have memories of this album that you want to talk about, hopefully you got a chance to listen again and bring all that feelings up, put it in the comments below. memoriesmadeofmusic.com. Go to the website. You can vote on albums that you want to talk about, movies that we want to watch next. We're having fun. We're just celebrating music all the time. Stay awesome.